In the entire history of naval warfare, only one commander fought more than 20 battles and never lost a single one. His name wasn't Nelson. It wasn't Yamamoto. It wasn't any of the admirals you've been taught about. He was Korean. And the most remarkable thing about Admiral Yi Sun-sin isn't his perfect record. It's what happened between his greatest victories. His own government arrested him, tortured him until his legs broke, sentenced him to death twice, then handed his entire fleet to a rival who destroyed it in a single night. When they came crawling back, begging him to save the nation, he had 13 ships left. 13 against a Japanese armada. What he did next is the most impossible victory the ocean has ever seen. Here's what most people don't know about Yi Sun-sin. Before he became the most feared admiral in Asia, he was a failure. He passed his military examination in 1576 at the age of 31, a late start by any measure. And it gets worse. His commanding officer, General Yi, saw his junior's talent as a threat. So he framed him. False charges of desertion during a border skirmish with Jurchen raiders. He was stripped of his rank, thrown in prison, and tortured until he could barely walk. After his release, he was forced to serve as a common foot soldier, an officer reduced to carrying a pike. Only the intervention of a childhood friend, the scholar official Myeongnyang, saved his career. This man who couldn't even protect himself from court politics was about to become the most dangerous naval commander who ever lived. In March 1591, he was appointed naval commander of Jeolla-Lef province at the port of Yosu. While every other military leader in Korea dismissed the rumors of a Japanese invasion, he treated them as certainty. He drilled his sailors relentlessly. He reinforced his harbor defenses. And in a workshop on the Yosu waterfront, he built something the world had never seen. The Gyeobuxian, the turtle ship. Over 100 feet of floating destruction. Iron spikes covering the entire roof, so dense that any Japanese soldier who tried to board would impale himself before reaching the deck. A carved dragon head at the bow belching smoke to obscure the ship's movements. 6 gun ports on each side, each armed with heavy mortars. This wasn't a warship. It was a weapon designed by a man who understood exactly how his enemy liked to fight, and built the perfect counter. He had exactly 1 year before the largest invasion fleet in Asian history would arrive. In April 1592, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the warlord who had unified Japan, launched the invasion. 158,000 battle-hardened samurai crossed the strait. The Korean army, undermanned and poorly led, collapsed almost overnight. Busan fell in hours. Seoul fell in 18 days. The king fled north, abandoning his own capital. Korea was being swallowed whole, province by province. Japanese forces pushed so deep that they were already planning their assault on China. Only one thing stood between total conquest and Japan's supply lines stretching across the sea. A provincial naval commander at Yosu that nobody in the Japanese command had ever heard of. What happened next made the Japanese stop believing their own battle reports. Yi Sun-sin unleashed his fleet. At Okpo, his ships destroyed 11 Japanese vessels without losing a single one. At Seishin, he deployed his turtle ship for the first time. All 12 enemy ships were sunk. A Japanese bullet pierced Yi's left shoulder during the battle. He pulled it out and kept fighting. At Dongpa, 21 Japanese ships destroyed. At Danghangpo, 26 more. Then came Hansen Island, the masterpiece. He lured the Japanese fleet into open water using a feigned retreat, then encircled them in his famous crane wing formation. 59 Japanese ships were destroyed, 47 sunk, 12 captured. When the battle reports reached Toyotomi Hideyoshi in Japan, he issued an order that no Japanese warlord had ever received before. Cease all naval operations. Do not engage the Korean fleet. The sea belongs to Yi Sun-sin. He had single-handedly saved Korea from the sea. His reward was something far worse than anything the Japanese could do. Yi's victories made him the most celebrated man in Korea. But in the Joseon court, celebration bred jealousy. A rival general named Gyun, a man who had never won a significant battle, began poisoning King Seonjo's ear. He called Yi a drunkard, an idler, a man who hoarded his fleet instead of pressing the advantage. Then the Japanese played their card. A double agent named Yoshira fed the Korean court false intelligence, claiming a massive Japanese fleet would pass through a specific strait on a specific date. It was a trap, and Yi Sun-sin knew it. The waters were shallow, rock-studded, perfect for an ambush against the Korean fleet. Yi refused to sail. His enemies at court had exactly what they needed: refusal to obey a royal order. In 1597, King Seonjo made a decision that would cost 30,000 Korean lives. Admiral Yi Sun-sin, the only man keeping Korea alive, was relieved of command. Soldiers arrived at Yosu, placed him in chains, and marched him to Seoul. In the capital's military prison, he was subjected to interrogation by torture: whipping, flogging, burning, the cudgel. They broke his legs. He was sentenced to death, twice. Both times, his friend Prime Minister Myeongnyang stood before the king and pleaded for Yi's life, arguing that executing Korea's only competent admiral during an active invasion was insanity. The king relented, but the punishment was still devastating. Yi Sun-sin was stripped of all rank and demoted to the lowest position in the military, common infantry soldier. The greatest naval commander in Korean history was now a foot soldier carrying a pike. And the fleet he'd built? It was handed to one Gyun. If Yi was the only admiral who could fight the Japanese, what happened to his fleet without him? One Gyun took command of everything Yi had built: 150 warships, 30,000 trained sailors, years of preparation, and in a single catastrophic night, he threw it all away. On August 28, 1597, one Gyun sailed the entire Joseon fleet into a Japanese trap at Chilkanryang. He had no scouts, no reconnaissance, no plan. The Japanese fleet was waiting. They closed for melee combat, negating every advantage he had designed the fleet to exploit. The slaughter was total. Almost every Korean warship was sunk or captured. One Gyun fled to a nearby island, where Japanese soldiers were already waiting. They killed him on the beach. Of 150 warships that Yi Sun-sin had built, trained, and commanded to 23 consecutive victories, exactly 13 survived. The king, who had tortured his best admiral, now sent a desperate message: "Come back and save us." King Seonjo reinstated Yi Sun-sin as naval commander. But the king's next order was even more insulting than the imprisonment: disband what's left of the fleet. Merge the surviving sailors into the army. The sea, the king declared, was already lost. Yi Sun-sin refused. He wrote back to the throne with a sentence that would become the most famous words in Korean military history: "I still have 13 ships. As long as I am alive, the enemy shall not be safe on the sea." He traveled south to find the remnants: 13 battered warships, 200 exhausted sailors, the survivors of a fleet that once numbered 30,000. Not a single turtle ship among them. Every advantage he had spent 5 years building was gone. He was starting from nothing. And the Japanese fleet, over 100 warships strong, with hundreds more support vessels, was already sailing toward the Korean capital. He chose his ground with the precision of a man who had spent a lifetime studying the sea. The Myeongnyang Strait, a narrow channel near Jindo Island where the water funnels between the mainland and the island like a river through a canyon. The currents here are among the most treacherous in the Pacific. They reverse direction every few hours, reaching speeds that can spin a warship sideways. In that bottleneck, hundreds of ships were meaningless. Only a handful could engage at once. And when the tide turned, the Japanese fleet would be fighting the current itself. He positioned his 13 ships at the mouth of the strait and waited. When the Japanese fleet appeared on the horizon, a forest of masts stretching across the water, he gave the order to advance. His own captains refused. They had seen what happened at Chilkanryang. So Admiral Yi Sun-sin sailed forward alone. Yi Sun-sin's flagship sailed alone into the Japanese formation. For over an hour, he fought completely surrounded, Japanese ships pressing in from every direction, arrows and musket balls hammering his deck. His crew fired their cannons in every direction, reloading and firing again as fast as the gunners could work. He stood on the deck in full view, refusing to take cover, his war drums thundering across the water. The message was impossible to miss. Their admiral would rather die than retreat. One by one, the other 12 ships followed. The fast reversing currents of the Myeongnyang Strait did the rest. Japanese ships, packed together in the narrow channel, began slamming into each other. The current dragged damaged vessels sideways into their own formation. Yi's gunners destroyed 31 warships. The Japanese Admiral Kurushima Michifusa was killed, his head mounted on a pike on Yi's flagship. When it was over, Korea had lost 0 ships. The Korean casualties were so few that Japanese commanders refused to believe the reports. An entire Japanese armada had been turned back by 13 ships. It remains the most lopsided naval victory in recorded history. Yi Sun-sin had saved Korea a second time. He rebuilt the fleet, won more battles, and by late 1598, the war was finally ending. Japan's warlord Toyotomi Hideyoshi died, and the Japanese began their retreat. But there would be one last battle. On December 16, 1598, at the Myeongnyang Strait, he led 82 warships alongside a Chinese Ming fleet against Shungi Yoshihiro's retreating force. The battle began at 2 in the morning. Darkness, fire, cannon thunder echoing off the strait walls. Yi's fleet was winning. The Japanese retreat was turning into a rout. And then, in the chaos before dawn, a stray bullet struck Admiral Yi Sun-sin in the chest. He collapsed behind his command post. He was dying. He turned to his son Yi-ho and his nephew Yi-wan and spoke his final words. "The battle is at its height. Beat my war drums. Do not announce my death." Yi's son and nephew obeyed. They draped his body in his command cloak and kept beating the drums. The fleet fought on. No one, not the Korean sailors, not the Chinese allies, not the Japanese enemy, knew that Admiral Yi Sun-sin was dead. Korea won the battle. The Imjin War was over. Japan's invasion had failed. And the man who had made that possible, who had fought 23 battles and won every single one, who had been imprisoned and tortured by his own government, who had been given 13 ships and told to give up, who had won the most impossible victory in naval history, died at the exact moment of his nation's final triumph. He was 53 years old. Today, a 16-foot bronze statue of Admiral Yi Sun-sin stands in Gwanghwamun Square, the very center of Seoul. Every Korean child knows his name. Military historians rank him alongside Horatio Nelson and Tōgō Hyakiro as one of the 3 greatest naval commanders who ever lived. But he did something neither of them could claim. He won every single battle. He was betrayed by everyone who should have supported him. And when his country gave him nothing but 13 ships and a death sentence, he gave them back their entire civilization. If you didn't know his name before today, ask yourself why. The greatest naval commander in history didn't lose a single battle in his career. He just had the misfortune of being born in a country the Western world wasn't paying attention to. If this story deserves to be told, subscribe to make sure the next one reaches you.